I'm a relatively new player to the Rising Storm franchise. It's nothing I've necessarily done before, and I felt as though it was a time to jump in and get a grip with the series, because it looked like everything I wanted it to be. It was somewhere in between a tactical shooter and Battlefield. It was a bit like Squad, it was a bit like Project Reality, and it looked like it could be a great shooter. But after the initial phases in pre-alpha and alpha, I felt relatively discerned with the direction the game was heading in, and I felt as though it wasn't perhaps going to amount to a game that I was interested in. There were lots of elements like gunplay and map design and team play that never really seemed to divulge together into something that would be fun and fluid and effective. But I'm happy to say, after playing the game in a new beta phase, that I feel as though I may have been entirely wrong. The new beta state of Rising Storm 2 Vietnam is a very promising version of the game that I could see in the trailers but never quite materialized in the previous states that I had played. It looked like a combination of Battlefield and a more tactical shooter. So imagine a Battlefield title but on team play steroids and requiring real coordination to be effective and a good team. And I'm happy to say that's exactly the experience I had when I jumped in and played it. It's a very strange amalgamation of lots of different games. That's the only way I can really describe it, and I'm sure that's discrediting the franchise because obviously I'm a relatively new player and I have no idea how things like this have worked before. But the best way to describe it to somebody who is new is the snappiness and fluidity and solid gunplay of Battlefield 3 combined with the tacticality and intelligence of a game like Squad, where you're required to work as a coordinated team through command to squads as an entire unit. It's really interesting to play because you'll find yourselves running around in fields with explosions popping off around you, helicopters flying above you, bullets flying, and you'll be in there with your squad in an absolute messy situation. But the fluidity and snappiness of gunplay and movement combined with the elements of team play make for a very unique experience that I don't think I've had in any game since the likes of Battlefield 3. To give you a rough idea of how exactly I've come to this conclusion, I'll give you a scenario of gameplay I've found myself in. I've found myself spawning on something called a squad tunnel, which is a deployment point placed down by one of the people on the Viet Cong. You spawn on the squad tunnel, and I was asked to run to an objective by my squad leader and the command unit, who said that we needed to capture that objective in order to cut off the enemy team in order to stop them scoring points. So the point system worked relatively similarly to Battlefield, the movement was the same pace of Battlefield, and the gunplay felt like Battlefield, but the actual team play and deployment points felt a bit more like Squad, where you're listening to entire elements of a team coordinating together. And then when you start firing your weapon, you get this sort of rugged, metallic feeling with each shot. You feel the recoil, you see the muzzle flash, you get the sound, and it comes together to give you that real satisfying crunch that a lot of you guys probably know that I'm talking about when it comes to gunplay. But whilst you're doing all of this stuff, whilst everything's going on around you, there's this huge Battlefield/Squad combination where the world around you is incredibly active. There's explosions going off, there's people shouting out and saying, "Ah, I killed that guy, I need to reload," or, you know, you've just blown somebody up and you can hear them sort of like dying. They're just sort of like, ugh, ugh. And it's great. It's so cool because it comes together to bring a series of intensity. There is very few moments in the game where something isn't intense. You'll be running around shooting at people, feeling constantly on your toes because this visceral environment is unfolding in front of you. And this was such a far step away from what I played in pre-alpha and alpha state, where everything just didn't seem to quite come together. Whereas in this one, I'm attacking objectives in a coordinated unit. I'm enjoying the gunplay and the movement around me, and everything's tying in together to create a very consuming and involving experience that surrounds around teamwork, play, and progression. You can unlock things like character customization and get higher ranks at the same time as working in a very satisfying team play environment. So even though games like Squad don't necessarily have a progression system, Rising Storm 2 Vietnam replicates the satisfying team play and gunplay in the game to the sense that even if there wasn't a progression system, you wouldn't really mind. But the fact that there is just a major bonus. So, comparisons aside, I feel as though I've painted a picture well enough for those of you who haven't played the game to kind of get an idea of how things unfold and what it's like, and I'm sure some of the gameplay is illustrating that to you as well. But In terms of just a standalone title as a Vietnamese war game, it's a very consuming experience because the overall aesthetic of all the character designs, the guns you'll be using, and the things like the old Huey helicopters and napalm strikes coming together creates an environment that I haven't seen since Battlefield Bad Company 2 Vietnam. I know I probably just said that I was going to throw comparisons out the window, but that's probably the best example of a Vietnam War game, bar the original Vietnam War game created by the same company. I've mostly just been playing solo on the game, mostly down to the fact that I don't really know many people who have access to the current phase or perhaps haven't pre-purchased it. So even in that sense, I've enjoyed an experience that feels involving and active and progressive in all the right ways. Solid gunplay combined with a good progression system combined with satisfying in-game experiences has really pleasantly surprised me, because I honestly believe that the pre-alpha and alpha states of this game didn't kind of outline this direction for the title and didn't really make me feel as though that this was going to be a game that I would play as much as Battlefield or Squad, because it just didn't seem to get the kind of elements of those games that I enjoyed. But the overall experience I've had thus far of very quick time to kills combined with solid gunplay and, you know, snappy movement is everything I want out of a shooter, and the Vietnamese war setting is fantastically composed by some of the developers. Now, there has been this thing about graphics. People have said to me, hey, you know what, this really isn't that good looking a game. And I have to say, that doesn't even matter. Like, this game is a very good looking game. In fact, I feel as though some of the YouTube compression does it injustice. When you actually play it and you're involved in some of the visceral experiences that are happening in front of you, it's fantastic. But even if you were concerned about the graphics, the overall core mechanics of gameplay are so well thought out and so well brought together that you shouldn't really give a damn. You shouldn't really care too much about how the game looks, because the gunplay and movement is so fun and enjoyable. And games like Insurgency, where they're very good at their own style of gunplay and movement, comes to mind. Because Insurgency isn't necessarily the best looking game in the world, but because people appreciate the kind of style of gameplay it brings to the fold and how it executes it, it doesn't matter. And the same principle applies here. So beyond incredible amounts of praise that I've had for this game so far, what gripes do I have presently? Now, I still feel as though the UI is perhaps a bit too in your face and not refined enough yet. I understand that you need to be able to see certain elements of the game through some kind of overlay system, but even turning off the tactical view, things feel as though they're getting in the way a lot. Maybe that's just me, and maybe I have some kind of claustrophobia to everything, but it just feels as though right now they could scale a lot of the things that they're placing over the front screen of the game into the map alone. By pressing M, you would simply see all of this information without having to focus too much on things happening around you. When you deploy, the tactical view is the first thing you see, and it's so overwhelming with information. You've got, you know, these are all the things you have in your loadout, and these are all the things that are going on around you, and it feels too much like Battlefield and not enough like Squad in that respect, where in Squad, the map is almost everything you need and a compass to outline and illustrate things that are going down around you. I feel as though that's something that could be improved, and I'm sure there are some people who probably agree and disagree with me. Another thing I feel as though is a bit off right now is the kind of layouts of squads and command elements. At the moment, there are lots of different types of classes you can utilize and lots of different squads you can join and a commander that can take charge, but it's quite weird in the sense that there isn't any easy cohesion to how to communicate with all of these elements and how exactly, you know, certain things should be utilized. As a new player who's jumped into this game, I had to do a lot of researching around how the hell a radio man worked and what the hell I should be using it for, and, you know, things like that would be quite nice in a gun range format, a tutorial gun range format perhaps. But also things like in Squad, you could use V, B, and G to communicate to every single element within the game. Whereas in Rising Storm Vietnam, it took me a while to figure out how the hell to talk to my team, how the hell to talk to my squad, and if or not there was any kind of proximity chat. And I feel as though that's not simplistic enough at the moment. I feel as though it's somewhere in the middle of trying to give you all of the elements of Battlefield 1 or Battlefield 4 and sort of spoon feed you, this is the information you should know and you should probably go to this objective and do this, whereas it's sort of halfway at the same time saying, well, you can communicate with all your squad mates like you do and, you know, be an effective team in, like, Squad, and it's just a bit of a mishmash. I'd rather they went for one idea rather than the other. I like the idea of communicating with my teammates, but if I'm doing all of that and talking to command and teammate elements very succinctly and looking at my map and referring to information that's going on in these discussions, then I really should have no need to have such a UI that's so much in my face and trying to inform me of so many different things. But yeah, that's just about it for, you know, my account of a game from somebody who's never really played it before. Never really been a Rising Storm Vietnam player before. And overall, I'm very impressed, and I feel as though it's going to be heading in a direction which will probably make it one of the best shooters of 2017. Arguably, if not the best. It's still got some loose ends that needs tying up, but the overall direction of the game and what they're aiming for, and the gunplay and movement system, everything just feels fantastic, and I feel as though once they iron out some issues as well, which does include hit registration, which you may or may not have seen in the gameplay, will be everything I need. So guys, that's about it for me today, the Tactical Brit. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again soon in another video.